Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at political hopium, Epstein, taxes, and false promises.
Okay.
Um, this is a piece that digs into some political narratives, especially around like big reveals and sweeping changes, and kind of looks at how they exploit our desire for easy solutions.
Yeah.
And this is something I think we can all relate to. Sometimes it feels like we're always just waiting for that one big political moment that will finally fix everything. Have you ever felt that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this source, it dives right into that with a prime example, and that's all the fervor around the Epstein files.
Oh, yeah.
People were so convinced that those files would expose a massive network of all these powerful people,
It's huge, yeah.
involved in some seriously shady stuff. But you got to think about it. If the government actually had concrete evidence against all these figures, wouldn't they have already used it? Why wait?
That's a good point, yeah. And think about this. Trump himself was in power for 4 years.
Right.
If he had some bombshell to drop, wouldn't that have been the ultimate power move?
Exactly.
Instead, what we got were, heavily redacted documents, mostly stuff we already knew.
Yeah, it was really interesting how they released it, too, all strategically to certain influencers. The source calls this the Trump maneuver.
The Trump maneuver. Okay, so break that down for me. What is the Trump maneuver exactly?
Well, you see this pattern over and over again. First, you generate massive hype around an event or some revelation. Then, when it comes time to deliver, you fall short.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you got to blame somebody, right? So in this case, with the Epstein files, the FBI became the scapegoat.
It's almost like a magician's trick.
Yeah.
Like you're distracting us from the real issue with something shiny and attention-grabbing.
Yeah.
While we're busy focusing on the distraction, the deeper problems just stay there. They remain unaddressed.
Exactly. And it's not just the Epstein files either. Think about the promise to release all the JFK assassination files. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that was another one where it felt like we were finally going to get the full story.
All this buzz around it, and then what happened? Another letdown. The author of this piece, they argue that these events are all designed to keep us addicted to political hope,
Okay.
rather than actually focusing on real change.
It's like dangling a carrot in front of us.
Yeah.
Keeping us chasing after something that may never actually come to be. Speaking of carrots, let's move on to another big one. The promise to repeal the income tax.
Oh, yeah.
Every election cycle, we hear candidates vowing to dismantle the IRS, free us from the tax burdens. It sounds almost too good to be true, right?
It does, and I think it really taps into a desire that's really deep.
Yeah.
People just want less government control, especially over their finances. But this source makes a fascinating argument.
Okay.
They say the income tax is more about control than it is about revenue. It's a tool for social engineering. It's a way to shape behavior.
I'm listening. Tell me more about that. How does that work?
Okay, well, think about it. Think about the complexities of the income tax system. All the regulations, the incentives, the penalties for noncompliance. It forces us to comply, to play by their rules. Plus, it allows for wealth redistribution. You can move money around based on, whatever the government decides.
So it's not just about collecting money. It's about wielding power and influencing how we behave. It's about how resources are distributed, all of that.
Precisely. And to illustrate this point, the source highlights a pretty striking fact, and that is that there's a bill, H.R. 25. This has been introduced in every single Congress since 2005 to repeal the income tax.
Wait, so every single Congress since 2005? And what happens to it?
Nothing. It never goes anywhere. It's political theater. It's just a way for politicians to signal their allegiance to certain ideologies without having to actually deliver.
Well, that makes you wonder, why would any politician, regardless of their party, willingly give up that kind of power? It seems like the political will to truly dismantle the system just isn't there.
Yeah, and even the Republican Revolution in 1994, which was this big push for smaller government, didn't touch the income tax.
Yeah.
And the author argues that figures like Trump, they use these promises as talking points to energize their base. It's not a genuine policy goal.
So we get caught up in the rhetoric, the hope of this better future. But the reality is that these promises, they've been made and broken for decades. It's like we're being sold a fantasy. We're being distracted from the fact that real change might actually require a much more fundamental shift in how we think about power and control.
Yeah, it can feel pretty disheartening, when you start seeing these patterns over and over.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's easy to become cynical about the whole thing.
For sure.
But, the point of this isn't to make us feel hopeless. It's about empowering us.
Right.
To see these tactics for what they are so we can make, more informed choices.
Exactly. And this source really drives home the point that, One of the most effective tools in the political playbook is distraction.
Hmm.
Keeping us focused on these sensational stories, those manufactured scandals, all those shiny objects,
All the time, yeah.
and it keeps us from focusing on the issues that really matter.
It's that classic look over there trick.
Yeah.
While we're busy arguing about the latest Twitter controversy or whatever shiny thing they're dangling, the things that actually impact our lives are being swept under the rug.
Exactly. And the author of this piece argues that it's not accidental.
Yeah.
They say the government actually thrives on chaos and division.
Oh, absolutely.
It keeps us fighting amongst ourselves, wasting our energy in these meaningless battles, instead of uniting to challenge the system itself.
Right.
So instead of getting caught up in who's in or who's out of power,
Mm-hmm.
we should be questioning the very nature of that power.
Yes.
Like, is the system itself inherently flawed?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
The article pushes us to think beyond that, traditional left-right political divide. Could it be that the pursuit of power, no matter who's holding it, inevitably leads to corruption and this desire for control?
Yeah, it's a radical thought,
It is.
but it makes you wonder if we're all just playing different roles in the same rigged game.
And that's exactly what the author wants you to consider. They're not trying to give you all the answers or tell you what to believe.
Right.
They're challenging you to think critically, to question your assumptions, to explore different perspectives.
So if we accept this premise that the system itself is the problem, how do we escape this cycle of political hopium?
Okay.
The source says begging for better masters won't lead to freedom, so what will?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The author proposes a path forward, and it might seem pretty radical to some folks, and that is non-compliance.
Non-compliance. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that look like in a practical sense?
Well, they argue that the government's power ultimately depends on our consent.
Okay.
We comply with their laws, we pay our taxes, we participate in their systems. And they're saying if we withdraw our consent, we weaken their control.
So it's about opting out, refusing to play their game.
It's definitely about recognizing that we have a choice, that our participation isn't inevitable, but it's not just passive resistance either.
Oh.
The source emphasizes the importance of building alternative systems, parallel structures that operate outside the control of the existing power structures.
So not just tearing down the old, but creating something new. Something that empowers individuals and communities to govern themselves. It sounds almost utopian.
It does.
But I have to admit, there's something appealing about taking back that power.
Right. And while it may sound idealistic, the author challenges us to consider, have any other approaches truly worked?
That's true.
Have those incremental changes, those appeals to better masters, really brought us closer to the freedom and autonomy that we crave?
Yeah, it's a big question.
It is.
And I don't know if there are easy answers,
Yeah.
but it definitely makes you think about what real change actually looks like. Is it about reforming the existing system or creating something entirely new?
And that's the conversation this source wants to spark.
Right.
It's not about having all the answers. It's about challenging those assumptions and limitations of the current political discourse.
It's about asking ourselves, what does real change look like to me, and what am I willing to do to make it happen?
Precisely. The author urges us to stop waiting for some external savior, some political figure who will swoop in and fix everything.
Yeah,
We have to take responsibility for our own destiny and start building the world we want to see.
that's a powerful message and a little daunting, if I'm being honest.
It is.
Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step, according to the source, is awareness.
Okay.
Recognize those patterns of manipulation, those tactics designed to keep us distracted and divided. Once we see the game for what it is, we can start to play it differently or choose not to play at all.
It all comes back to critical thinking, right? Questioning everything, digging deeper, refusing to settle for easy answers or empty promises.
Absolutely. It's about becoming informed, engaged citizens, not passive consumers of political propaganda.
Right.
We have the power to shape our world, but we have to reclaim that power.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
It's easy to feel a little overwhelmed, with the idea that we're constantly being manipulated by these political forces.
Yeah, it's true. The systems at play can feel really massive, but remember, the source isn't saying we're powerless.
Right.
It's actually quite the opposite. The author believes we hold a lot more power than we realize.
So how do we tap into that power if we're not supposed to wait for politicians to save us? Where do we go from here?
Well, the source offers a few concrete steps.
Okay.
One of the big ones is sharpening our critical thinking skills.
Okay.
It's so easy to get caught up in the emotional appeal of a political argument, But we need to kind of step back a little bit and analyze the information that we're actually consuming.
So, like, how do we actually do that? It
Yeah.
feels like we're bombarded with information from all sides these days.
It starts with diversifying our sources instead of just relying on, one or two news outlets. Expose yourself to a wide range of viewpoints, even ones that you might not initially agree with.
So it's about getting out of our echo chambers, right? We're only hearing from people who already share our views.
Exactly. And it's not just about, the where of our information, it's about the how.
Uh-huh.
Don't just accept things at face value. Question the claims being made. Do your own research. Look for evidence to support or to refute what you're hearing.
It's like being a detective, right?
Yeah.
Following that trail of information, trying to uncover the truth.
I like that analogy. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Challenge authority. Demand transparency. Seek clarification when something doesn't add up. You have the right to be informed and to understand the decisions that are impacting your life.
Yeah, this whole conversation has really highlighted the need for us to be more proactive, more engaged citizens. And the source also emphasizes the power of community in this process.
Oh, absolutely. When we feel isolated and powerless, it's easy to just kind of fall into despair. But when we connect with others who share our values and aspirations, we can start to imagine and build something different.
There's strength in numbers, right? It's a reminder that we're not alone in this.
Exactly. And community can take so many different forms. It could be joining a local activist group, participating in online forums, or simply just having these open and honest conversations with your friends and family about the issues that matter to you.
Yeah, it's about building those connections, those networks of support that can sustain us, when things get tough. Because let's be real, this path towards a more just and equitable world,
Yeah.
it's not going to be easy. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be times when we feel like giving up.
You're absolutely right. But if we have a strong community to support us, to encourage us, to challenge us, and to hold us accountable, we're much more likely to persevere, and we're much more likely to achieve those goals that might have seemed impossible, when we were on our own.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring us back to that really powerful question from the source. If begging for better masters won't lead to freedom, what will?
What a great way to frame it. This whole conversation has been about challenging that very notion. We've been conditioned to think that change comes from above, from those in positions of power.
Right.
But what if real change comes from below, from us, from the collective action of individuals who are tired of waiting for permission to build a better world?
This deep dive has really been about empowering you, the listener, to see through those illusions of political hopium and to recognize the power that you hold.
It's about taking ownership of your beliefs, your values, and your vision for the future. It's about becoming an active participant in shaping the world around you rather than a passive observer.
So go out there, question everything, connect with others who share your vision, and never underestimate your ability to make a difference.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better future.